Hello. So, welcome to the final part of the Detectives Trilogy. The first one was the thing I just wrote. The second one I discovered was connected to the first one, and this was written specifically to be the rounder offer, the last part of it all. So this came about. I've been trying for ages to start this one, and then one day randomly, my friend said something was Pigswill, and I said, "Well, that's a lot of Codswallop," and then that was it. The spark went off, and that became the names. So hold on tight because this is quite a hefty thing. So here we go, part 3, the ending. Detective Pigswill and Sergeant Codswallop, keepers of the peace in the futuristic sci-fi space police. Straight-edged, straight-laced, and very much straight-faced, they were exemplars of their craft. A vid call from the station had interrupted their eggs and bacon. Breakfast would have to be quick. They were needed down the nick. And when breakfast was done, Codswallop said, "What should we do?" Pigswill said, "Whatever you want. I'm going for my morning poo." A short while later, ablutions all done. They were both feeling quite swell after using the 3 seashells. Sharp suits and polished shoes, these upholders of the law headed to the garage and set off in their flying car. Down at the station, under its protective dome, they were introduced to their new partner, a robot Sherlock Holmes. "Why do we need a new partner? We work better by ourselves." "Because you're my 2 best detectives, and I don't trust anyone else." "Fair enough," the paragons of virtue said. "Come on, robot Sherlock, let's put this case to bed." They headed for the ready room, which was downstairs and to the rear, and loaded up and stocked themselves with all the latest gear. State-of-the-art detectors, laser and ray guns, and lots of fancy gadgets to help them catch the wrong uns. Then they handed the files to Robot Sherlock and said, "Tell us what you see, and explain it to us in the Kubrick Cafe over an Earl Grey tea." And once they were sat on their hover stools, each one with a drink, Robot Sherlock perused the file. The detective said, "Tell us what you think." The robot sipped his robot coffee. The coppers quaffed their tea so pale. Then Robot Sherlock cleared his metallic throat and said, "Here's a sordid tale. 3 planets, dozens of crimes, all with the same MO. Graves robbed, corpses stolen, by whom and why, we don't know. The latest was John Reremy, a hollow porno star. And oh, look at this. They didn't just steal his entire corpse, just his 12-inch penis." "Curious," the cops muttered, "and also pretty sick. What would anybody want with a dead corpse's dick?" "There's more," continued Holmes. "This one, they just took the finger bones, and another the eyes. This one, legs and thighs. A whole corpse here, a body part there. It looks like we've got ourselves a modern-day Birkenhair." Dun, dun, dun. "Bugger," said Pigs and Cods, the dirty grave robbing sods. "We need to stop this dastardly doer from defiling the dead." "Well said," said Holmes. Codswallop chimed. "How do we solve a crime that's 3 planets wide? We'll never have the time." "It's a 2-pipe ponder," said Sherlock, gazing yonder, then pulled out his robot pipe and filled it with something ripe. And as he sucked and puffed, eyes closed, cogs whirring away, Pigswill said, "I'll get the scones in then." Codswallop said, "Way!" Towards the end of the second pipe, Holmes stirred and leapt to his feet. The 2 detectives were also stirring, but that was just the tea. "Tit." "What?" "Temporal inference transperambulation." "What?" "Time travel." "Oh, that old fella." "Wait, what?" Holmes explained. "You have famous detectives in your genealogy. Your family's been solving crimes throughout history. We'll travel back in time, nab a couple of the buggers, bring them back here, and they can help us solve this crime." "Sounds good in theory, but me no buts," said the excited lanky robot Sherlock Holmes. "The game is afoot." Later, at the Temporal Inference Transperambulation Agency, Holmes pointed out, it's not strictly legal, so we'll have to be as stealthy as a proverbial beagle. But we're exemplary coppers. We don't do illegal, and beagles aren't stealthy. No, but they rhyme, Holmes said with a smile. A bemused silence was the reply this time. So once inside, deceptions were deployed, ruses were risen, diversions were done, subterfuge surfaced, and cunning was called into play. Then switches were switched, buttons were bashed, dials were dialed, levers were levered, lights lit, flashes flashed, lasers lasered, and all manner of impressive sci-fi went down. And all with a thoroughly suitable soundtrack, like pop, whiz, and crack. They materialised in a Whitby street in 1884. There was a building in front with a red light outside, and they knocked upon the door. A woman answered, all perfume and matronly bosoms. We're here for Millsteam and Boompunk. We're distant cousins. In that case, come in, you strangely dressed three. I'm always happy with friends of the carnal constabulary. The what of the what? Asked the naive future cops as they got their first look at a knocking shop. Eyes wide, mouths wide, blushing with brains in overdrive. Holmes felt right at home. This way, said the madam. It's the door over there. And then a curious thing happened. Robot Sherlock Holmes started talking to an empty chair. The madam thought he was mad, and the detectives were very bemused, but decided to leave him to it for now and hope he hadn't blown a fuse. My creator, said Holmes, what a privilege to meet thee. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's time-travelling ghost said, you can see me? Indeed, said Holmes, I have spectral vision and can see in wavelengths of every kind. And as the predator hadn't been invented yet, that didn't spring to Doyle's mind. Then while creator and creation conferred some more, the detectives had reached the door. Pigswill knocked and was bid, come in, and they walked inside to a room full of sin. Opium smoke filled the air. There were people undressed everywhere, and in the middle of it all, that legendary pair, Millsteam and Boompunk, in their Victorian underwear. The detectives were shocked and embarrassed, to say the least, and spent most of their time looking down at their feet. As Millsteam and Boompunk lounged in a lazy chair, Pigswill and Codswallop explained why they were there. And as the situation was described to Mills and Boone, Holmes and Doyle walked into the room. Holmes looked around at the debauchery to be seen, turned to Doyle's ghost and said, I see what you mean. The others thought the robot was talking to thin air. Only Millsteam and Boompunk knew Doyle's ghost was there. So what do you think? The future detectives asked. Do you want to come back to the future and help us bring these crims to task? Indeed we do, said the Victorian two. And maybe in the future, they'll have an updated version of the Kama Sutra. And as they got themselves dressed, our heroes averted their gaze, while Holmes introduced the invisible Doyle as the one from whom I was made. Then once they were ready, they took their leave. Two daddy detectives, a pair of stiff upper lips, a robot and a ghost, all bidding farewell to Mrs. Hudson, their accommodating host. And once outside, sci-fi sounds and sci-fi lights filled the air. And if anyone had been watching, 1 minute there were 5 creatures, the next, they simply weren't there. Time was travelled in but an instant. They materialised outside a pub in the year 2004, just as the body of a rough-looking fellow got thrown out through the door. They walked inside to an incredible sight. It was a full-on old-school bar fight. Tables and chairs, bottles and glasses all flying through the air. Fists were bunched, punches were punched, melee and scuffling everywhere. And in the middle of it all, probably the cause of it, were Detective Shocktails and Sergeant Vomit. They were going at it, gung-ho and no fear, beating anyone who got too close without even spilling their beer. But when Shocktail reached for a shot, someone sent it flying. The two detectives got steam out their ears, and pretty soon everyone was crying. Then all was quiet, except for the moans and groans and one of the modern day detectives said, "That robot looks like Sherlock Holmes." "Indeed I do," said he to these two, "and I like the way you handle those toughs. You have very impressive fisticuffs." Grew up on a council estate, school of hard knocks. Plus, Muhammad Ali's trainer taught us how to box. "Pugilism," said the deer-stalkered one, "a skill in our time that is mostly gone." "Your time?" the modern cops asked, ordering a picture of cheer. "You motley crew best pull up a beer and tell us why you're here." Holmes did the honours. Millsteam and Boompunk, Victorian detectives. Pigswill Codswallop, future detectives. And I'm a robot Sherlock Holmes, also from the future, if you hadn't guessed it. And who is the ghost? "Oh, I'm Sir Arthur Conan Doyle," said Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's ghost in surprise. "Pleased to meet you, but how can you see me with your human eyes?" "Oh, it's all down to the alcohol physics. We never miss the spirits." No, how they laughed and high-fived for 5 minutes. "Can we get back to the plot?" asked the perturbed future pair, both being annoyed at the only ones who couldn't see Doyle's ghost was there. "Indeed," said Sherlock, taking a chair, and explained what was what, when was when, and where was where. When he laid it all out, Shocktails and Vomit were aghast. "So you're our descendants from the future, and you're our relatives from the past?" "Pretty much, yup." They looked at each other. "Futuristic space beers, hell yes, where do we sign up?" Pigswill said, "Thank God for that. Now let's get out. Pigswill said, "Thank God for that. Now let's head outside. Everyone follow me." "Hang on," said Shocktails and V. "We just need a wee." Once this was done and rollies were rolled, they went outside and joined the others on the road. And then once again, an anomaly appeared, and the 8 strange creatures just up and disappeared. They arrived back at Tit to chaos everywhere, decided it wasn't worth explaining, and made themselves scarce. They took themselves to the Jules Verne Tavern. Pigswill asked, "What you all having?" Shocktails and Vomit were in space beer heaven. Romulan ale? Nope. Klingon blood wine? Nope. Aldebaran whiskey? Nope. Butterbeer? Nope. Scumble? Nope. This was disappointing to the modern day techs, so they defaulted to the master, turned to the robot Barlord, and in unison asked, "Pangalactic Gargle Blaster?" The robot Barlord looked in surprise and said, "If that's what you want to sup, 2 PPGBs coming right up." The 2 drinkers of every drink under the sun were jolly excited to try this one. The bar let out a hush. No one was going to miss this. "Here's to you, Mush. Here's to you, Mish." They clinked their glasses, and down the hatch it went. Silence for a moment. It didn't seem that mean. They took it quite well. Then their faces went green and they entered hell. Steaming ears, streaming tears, buckled legs, exploding heads, organ failure, hello sailor, pain by the score, they both hit the floor. Blood and bruises all over their faces. They were starting to look like one of the alien races. Was this the end of them solving cases? They staggered to their feet, all but dead. Shocktails was shocked and vomited. Everyone assumed they would die, but as they looked at each other in the bloodshot eye, they high-fived, whooped and hollered, slammed the empties down and screamed, "2 more of those bad boys, please, robot Barlord, space booze guy." The tavern erupted. People cheered and slapped them on the back. "If you've quite finished showing off, can we please get back on track?" So back on track was got back on. And the future detectives explained the plan. 3 planets, 1 per team. Now you're to search for clues at each crime scene. Here's some modern credits and relevant ID. Now you're only to investigate, then come back to Earth and confer with Sherlock, Cods, and me. "Got any ray guns?" Moonpunk asked. These were handed out. Shocktails pressed a button and vaporized the glass. "Oops, sorry." And be careful, said Codswallop. These aren't toys. Everything was now ready. It was time to go. Shocktails and Vomit downed their second PGGBs in one and said, I think we'll start tomorrow. And passed out on the floor. Next day, they were on their way, with Shocktails and Vomit feeling worse than any other hangover day ever in a history of 1,000 drunken hangovers. Ow, ouch, oh God, shush, I'm so out of sorts. And so here we leave them, heading to the feeling poorly and heading for the spaceport. Millsteam and Moonpunk, meanwhile, had reached their destination. The guidebook said it was a planet of degradation, which they were rather looking forward to. They wasted no time once in town in tracking the infamous red light district down. Doyle asked, what about the scene of the crime? The horny detectives replied, all in good time. Well, in that case, if you're off for some of your weird sex, I think I will take a spectral rest. And vanished. The dandy detective duo, now in futuristic garb, headed for the naughty area, while Doyle secretly went to the scene of the crime graveyard. The cops found an equivalent Brotham opium den and were soon partaking of the local spice, Zen. The madam was beckoned and asked, what next? We want a room for the night and some multi-gendered alien tentacle sex. Other things were discussed with open honesty. The madam was very impressed with their knowledge of carnality. Everything will be as you wish, you discerning pair, and headed off to arrange the biggest night of debauchery ever held anywhere. And when they got to the room, everything was prepared, with lots of alien beings in futuristic underwear. There were electronic devices to sate any of the vices, and futuristic sex toys of every kind, some of which boggled the mind. And as Millsteam and Moonpunk got ready to do what they do, we'll draw a veil over it and see what Doyle is up to. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's time and now planet travelling ghost had been detecting to his utmost. He found clues, followed imprints made by shoes, and generally did what the other two should do. Then he played his trump card and talked to the undead denizens of the crime scene graveyard. They're told what they had seen, descriptions and more, and even had a name for him. One of the perks was called Igor. Later, when he had all of the knowledge and learned all he could do, he headed back to the rooms to find the other two. He found them mid-carnal, doing sex of the alien kind, and decided to wait outside before it messed with his mind. Hours later, when they were finally done, they sat down and chatted to the ghostly one. Doyle told them what he knew, with a name and description of the off-world grave robbing too. Well, that's that then, said a sated Millsteam. Let's take this evidence back to Earth and catch up with the rest of the team. Yeah, you're welcome, said the long-suffering Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's ghost. And as we jump to Shocktails and Vomit, in a different part of space, we find them in a local tavern, 3 sheets to the wind, shit-faced. They were spending credits on lots of space booze and drunkenly asking everyone to give them some clues. They got absolutely nowhere when last orders rang out. And boy, oh boy, did they holler, moan and shout. We're officers of the law, here to save your necks. We demand some more booze and to commandeer your hover BMX. The landlord agreed just to shut them up, and then they rode off on the bikes with plenty of booze to sup. They reached the graveyard as the clock struck midnight and stumbled around the graves trying to stay upright. And while they were searching the place, they saw a dishevelled face. It was a local alien hobo whose life had hit an all-time low. They bid him well met and offered him some ale, then plonked down beside him. Vomit said, tell us a tale. He told them what had happened a few weeks past while they drank space beer and smoked space fags. 2 men, he said, had been digging up the dead, and one called the other one Baron. He gave them detailed descriptions for one so tipsy, but then pointed to the second of his heads and said, this one has a photographic memory. So once they had all they needed, there was no time to lose, so they plied him with credits to get himself more booze. Then they jumped on the BMX of the hovering kind and set off into the darkness, virtually blind. And now he will leave them to it because the journey will take a couple of days. And I'm sure you can all guess why. It's due to the pub stops along the way. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Pigswill and Codswallop and robot Sherlock Holmes had been detecting for all they were worth. Proper detecting, evidence collecting, clues traced in the police database, witnesses questioned in the proscribed way, writing down everything they had to say. Professional police work according to the law, later to be analysed to see what conclusions they could draw. And here Sherlock was invaluable with his logic detecting skill and really was an asset to Codswallop and Pigswill. Later, in a cafe, drinking Martian coffee, they went over all the data while dining on a Venusian baked potato. Okay, said Pigswill, what have we got? Codswallop looked at the paltry clues and said, not a lot. Full bodies had been stolen. Some they'd just taken bits. Paupers' graves had been robbed, as well as royal crypts. It was a national scandal, that was for sure. And apart from the criminals being off-worlders, they knew little more. The two master detectives had never not solved a crime and were getting rather worried that this could be the first time. Robot Sherlock Holmes tried to placate them for a day. Let's wait till the others get back and see what they have to say. This was seen as the best option, and they headed home for the night, while the others hurtled to Earth on their intergalactic space flight. Shocktails and Vomit were feeling quite queer as they drunk the bar dry of all the space beer, while Millsteam and Boonpunk had retired to their bunk and were ensconced in a spice-fueled carnal funk. A day or so later, back at base, everyone was there, with the two teams of travellers feeling much the worse for wear. And when they presented what they knew, Sherlock's top nearly blew, and everyone was surprised when the robot's face went red and his eyes went wide. The dastardly doers of these evil deeds are known to me indeed. Me too, said Doyle, and it makes my ectoplasmic blood boil. You see, said Sherlock, I've faced their relatives before. I'm a creator. Conan Doyle wrote about it in 1884. Indeed I did, said the ghost, and this is going to be a mission, as it looks like the future versions are carrying on the family tradition. Come on then, said Boonpunk, tell us what you know. I will indeed, said Sherlock, and I'll tell you where we need to go. He laid it all out, the family's history through time, and ended with, we need to go to Planet Frankenstein. Ha! No way, said Shocktails. Frankenstein isn't real. Oh, yes, he is, said Doyle. Very, very real. Well, blow me down, but I shouldn't be surprised. After all, we've time travelled and been on a space ride. Right then, it's settled, announced Detective Pigswill. We'll go and get the space cruiser. You guys have some time to kill. So Shocktails and Vomit headed to Milliway's bar next door, while Millsteam and Boonpunk went to cool their ardor. Pigswill and Codswallop went and explained it to their boss, leaving out the bit about the time-travelling mess. The boss agreed it was all sound and let them have the space cruiser, adding, please try not to bruise her. They were ready to go, but had to wait till the others who were getting down and dirty, so they didn't take off till the next day at 2:30. When they finally set off to Planet Frankenstein, they came up with a plan while drinking alien wine. They landed at a safe distance and made their way to the castle, all tooled up and ready for any hassle. As they reached the Gothic dwelling, they split up into 3 teams and entered the creepy castle by very different means. Millsteam and Boonpunk, being the fittest, climbed the walls. Shocktails and Vomit, being the drunkest, walked in the main gate, because they had brass balls. While Pigswill and Codswallop, because they were cocksure, went in search of a back door. Mills and Boone found a lab with lots of potions to be had. One said Jekyll and Hyde, and this was something that had to be tried. Milstein volunteered and took themselves a drink. Then what happened next is exactly what you'd think. They writhed on the floor, turning into a raging beast. Boonpunk thought this was awesome and sexy to say the least. And once the change had finished changing, they could only do one thing. They leapt on each other and began some beastly rutting. Meanwhile, Shocktails and Vomit had run into some henchmen. They turned the ray guns up to 11 and zapped the lot of them. There was ducking and diving and lots of lasers firing, bad guys falling everywhere and nary a scratch from the tipsy pair. They moved in close, drunken hand to hand. It was all rather loud, but Jackie Chan would have been proud. Sherlock, Pigswill and Codswallop had entered through the back door and encountered no resistance, which they found a terrible bore. They all met up again in a lab, with body parts everywhere. Bloody Nora, said Shocktails, there's a werewolf over there. Boonpunk said, hey, it's with me. We found this potion, you see. Doyle said, sounding vexed. Bet you can't guess what they did next. Nobody asked. Sherlock looked at the stolen parts and bodies under construction. It's just as I thought, he said. I was right in my deduction. They're creating creatures, making monsters, cyborgs, sex bots. Milstein and Boonpunk raised eyes at that one. They steal the parts, Holmes continued. And build the creatures, then sell them to rich folk, tailoring various features. Piano playing fingers, vocal cords of singers, even a porn star's penis. Well, that's pretty grim, everyone agreed. It's shocking what people will do to satisfy their needs. It's time to put an end to this, said Codswallop. After all, it's why we came. Indeed, replied Sherlock, it's time to play the end game. They went in search of the evildoers climbing to the highest tower, ready for anything in what would be their finest hour. At the workshop, they went inside, just as Baron Frankenstein exulted the immortal line, it's alive! Then turned to look at the motley eight. Coppers, grey. Sick 'em, he said, to various creations, and they're a shooting and punch-up of epic proportions. Everyone laid in, fists flying everywhere, with Werewolf Milstein doing violence in tattered underwear. There was a flying tackle with tackle flying, and lots of creatures bloodied and crying. Shocktails was shocking them, Vomit was vomiting on them, Pigswill was kicking ass, and Codswallop was taking names. It was a most exciting end game. Doyle could do nothing. He was helpless this time, but was really rather excited when his creation faced off with Baron Frankenstein. Holmes said, I beat your relatives before in 1884, and now once again with the Frankenstein, it's time to wipe the floor. The Baron cried, come at me, you freak, and I'll kick your robot ass into the middle of next week. Into the fray, Sherlock flew, using Venusian Kung Fu, taught to him by who knew who. It was a brutal fight, each laying in with all their might. Crushing blows, punching fists, an impressive battle from two pugilists. Holmes let out a roar, while Shocktails and Vomit handcuffed Igor. He threw a left, dodged a right, then the final blow landed, and evil Frankenstein he did smite. The battle was all but over, just some mopping up to be done. Doyle was full of elation and cried, well done, everyone! Pigswill and Codswallop handcuffed the knocked-out bloody Baron, then pulled a hip flask out. Special occasions, they explained, then passed it around until it was drained. Then later, as they herded the criminals onto the ship and loaded them into the lag, Milstein and Boonpunk went in search of swag. The trip back to Earth was peaceful and calm, and they ate themselves a space pizza and a space chip naan. Then arriving to no hero's welcome, They escorted the Crims to prison, and the job was well and truly done. They went to see the chief, all late, crammed into his office. He stared at the bedraggled lot and had no idea what to make of this. So he addressed the 3 officers he knew and offered commendations to you and your crew. Then once they'd been dismissed, they headed to the Solaris bar to get royally pissed, where even Pigswill and Codswallop, the normally sober techs, threw huge amounts of space beer down their necks. It was a set farewell celebration, the likes of which had never been seen in that tavern before and would be talked about well into the future days of yore. 2 days later, hangover's finally gone. There was nothing left to do except bid farewell to everyone. So once back at the tit agency, before stepping home, they each bid well met and farewell to Detective Pigswill, Sergeant Codswallop, and the robot Sherlock Holmes. Millskim and Moonpunk went first, taking all the swag they'd got, including vials and potions and a multi-gendered tentacle alien sex bot. They vanished into thin air, and next were for the once sober pair. They had oodles of luggage, all made out of alabaster, containing the ingredients of the pan-galactic gargle blaster. And in a flash they were gone, and it was just the future techs. And now the world was safe. The heroic trio moved on to what was next. Pigswill said, "I've heard from the chief, so you two need to come with me. We have to interview a recently returned raving space officer. I believe her name is Ellen Ripley." The end. That's it. Thank you. Thank you if you watched and if you're listening. I need liquids after that. Very dry. So that's the end of the Detectives Trilogy. Unfortunately, I don't think I'll write a future one where they go and explore Ripley's world. But that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you if you watched. I hope you enjoyed the previous 2, and farewell to the detectives. Thank you.